March the 12th, 2022. And we kind of do an update here on a variety of things happening. Um, the ongoing news coverage is focused a lot on the energy issue and also this ongoing grinding war in Ukraine, which obviously is moving at a much slower pace, I'm sure, than the Russian government and Putin expected. They've definitely stirred up a hornet's nest, you might say. On the other hand, a thing I want to kind of address today, there's a lot of the propaganda that's going around. It's pretty intense when you really think about it. And I mean, I've noticed a lot of things on, the videos that are on TV all the time, running in the background, cable news. And one of the things that this is all meant to portray the idea that somehow that Ukraine is actually winning the war. And who knows, maybe they are. But when you look at the details, you'll begin to see, you'll see very isolated clips. A Russian helicopter being shot down and ending up in a big fireball. Or the one yesterday was rather interesting. There was a large formation of Russian tanks driving along, and apparently it looks like now that they were probably attacked by one of those Turkish drones we've heard about, which can carry up to 4 missiles. And essentially, it's being portrayed as if, the whole unit was wiped out. But in reality, that you don't show any aftermath. It looks like maybe the actual losses were maybe 1 tank and 1 armored personnel carrier. and obviously the movement was disrupted for a period of time. But on the other hand, it isn't like this entire tank regiment was wiped out, like they're trying to sort of make it look like, which apparently isn't what really happened. And this is the sort of thing you continue to see here. I just thought that's kind of interesting to note that some of the things. I have another one here is also kind of interesting. By the way, if you like these videos, please subscribe. Giving a like, it helps with the algorithm. You can click the bell for notifications, and comments are appreciated. I'm trying to get it right, but with all the misinformation flying around from everybody involved, it's kind of hard to know. I mean, we know the Russians are putting out a tremendous amount of misinformation, which is largely being censored in the West, unless you're really looking for it. But I don't know why, because who's going to really believe it all anyhow? But here's another one I saw that was supposedly on a Newsweek article online from the Pentagon, I guess, was given it, and they were saying, well, about the MiGs, it says the Ukrainian Air Force has 56 aircraft, and they're flying between 5 and 10 hours a day on average. I'm like, and we're now almost 16, 17 days into the war at this time, and they're still doing that? Really? From what basis are they doing this? And they said, well, the Russians are only flying about 200 sorties a day, and some of the aircraft don't even go into Ukrainian airspace. They launch their missiles from outside of it. And I'm like, okay. So you got this one very large Air Force on the one hand, a very small Air Force. And when you look at the numbers, they're literally suggesting that the Ukrainians are flying as many sorties as the Russians are. Does that add up, really? And of course, the ones that are firing missiles are probably those missiles that you launch off of aircraft that are designed to fire missiles from a distance, which is what our aircraft would do in a similar war too. We wouldn't, fly our B-52 into hostile defended airspace. We'd launch the missiles outside of the defense areas. That's the way Israel does it in their battles with the various groups in Syria that's been ongoing. I mean, this isn't such a shocking thing, is what I'm getting at. But at any rate, this is the kind of stuff you're getting out there that, that somehow that the Ukrainians are really dominating, really a big factor in the air battle, where it seems to me that the main Ukrainian air power is those Turkish drones, which are having a significant harassment effect. And another thing that I saw a video yesterday also here. I might put some links to some of this stuff below so you can watch them if you're interested. But one on the logistics of the whole thing. And it kind of explained a lot of what happened, that the Russians rely heavily on their rail system for logistics in the country, and they're really deficient in trucks. And so once they got into Ukraine, well, they couldn't use their rail system anymore because I guess the Ukrainian defenders blew up the links, a natural thing to do. And so they had to bring stuff in by truck. and essentially the Ukrainian resistance obviously realized that the best way to slow up the armored forces to destroy the fuel supply. So they were attacking fuel trucks preferentially with ambushes, and apparently that's why they were deprived of a lot of fuel and came to a screeching halt there on the move on Kiev, as well as I'm sure a lot of these anti-tank weapons that are being fired at them. And so that's the kind of situation you have. But I'm just saying that there is a lot of propaganda floating around. On the other hand, you can't deny that the resistance of the Ukrainian people is pretty profound and really impressive. One thing that surprised me a little bit is the degree to which the eastern, more Russian ethnic areas are fighting just about as hard as anybody else is in this, which is interesting, which seems to indicate a tremendous miscalculation on the part of the Russian government. I don't know whether Putin didn't listen to reason or whether he was never told in the first place, but apparently, or their intelligence completely failed. But I think everybody's a little surprised at that, the degree to which even there's a lot of resistance. And one thing that's going to be clear, I think, going forward is that if you look at some of this, like was Mariupol over there, which is presumably more Russian ethnic city, if they weren't really in with fighting the invasion before this attack, after what's been done to them, they've got to absolutely despise the Russian government at this point. The horrendous bombardment and so forth. So it looks to me like that this is not going to end up in a situation where the Russians can really occupy the country peacefully. It looks like with all the weapons floating around there and all the resistance, this is going to be an ongoing quagmire that'll be probably worse for them than Afghanistan was, really. So that's kind of the situation. On the other hand, we have our own kind of war hawks that want to get involved somehow, and this whole debate over a small number of MiG-29s and getting them in there, I think that's an interesting. I guess it's kind of died down. The administration doesn't really want to do it, and I don't know whether that would be the big provocation or not. I think the big provocation is this idea of a so-called no-fly zone, which means basically that the NATO Air Forces enter the war outright, and that's a whole different level of escalation, which could get in really bad areas, I point out in previous videos. So that's kind of what that is. It doesn't seem like there's any real movement at the moment in that direction. And now it looks like this big force that's coming down. There's two different forces that are closing on the capital city of Kyiv, and there as the Ukrainians call it, and Kiev as the Russians call it apparently. But anyhow, they're closing in on it, and I guess they're starting to have some pretty heavy artillery bombardments in some of the outer suburbs. So what they exactly intend to do here, to me, it looks like they would, so to speak, really run into a massive resistance if they try to actually enter the city. I mean, this place has been fortified on the 2 weeks that have passed since the beginning of the conflict. So I don't know. We'll have to just feel for the Ukrainian people, what they're going through, and in my opinion, to some degree, what the U.S. government and particularly the Ukrainian government's putting them through. Because it looks to me like in the last negotiations they had in Turkey, the Russians laid out, I thought, a reasonable peace plan, given where they're at the moment. I mean, it seems like the Ukrainian government is not being realistic about what's going to happen. Sure, they may actually hold out, and they're going to be living in kind of a wasteland, I think, at the rate it's going. Whereas it would be different if the Russians were demanding their actual surrender and the replacement of the government, but that apparently is not a demand. They basically want the neutrality and independence of these two regions that they recognized in eastern Ukraine, and given where the people are over there, it's hard to know what that would turn into. And they basically want to form a recognition of Crimea, which was traditionally Russian anyhow, and it doesn't seem there's any likelihood they're going to get forced out of that anytime soon. And not to enter NATO, which they're not in anyhow. NATO isn't doing what they really want anyhow, so why would the hypothetical future membership of NATO be an issue when the issue is right now and they're not getting what they want? So it seems to me like that would be something that they should be open to considering. But it seems like the pride level is so high that they just won't do it. And so this disaster continues to arrive on with now 2.5 million refugees. Well, so that's that. On our side, of course, we're getting higher and higher gas prices that Biden is blaming on the Russians, which is true in part, but also we have to realize that we are not prepared for this largely because of Democrat policies going back to the Obama administration, and then were reinstated with a vengeance with the Biden administration. I mean, and during the Trump years, we made a lot of progress and achieved energy independence, relatively speaking, for a period of time. And obviously, some things are true. The Keystone Pipeline wouldn't be operational yet, even if Trump had been reelected. It would still take time to complete it. But I think there's been a lot of slowdown and development, more environmental regulations being imposed on oil companies and so forth that have effectively, held back the oil production recovery. Because a lot of it was actually shut down because of COVID and the lack of demand. They really were pumping so much at one point they couldn't store it all and nobody was using it all. So they had to kind of stop just because they were overflowing as effectively in terms of storage capacity. But getting it restarted has been difficult, and it hasn't really been complete because of all this Biden policy. And that's where I think he's legitimately being held to account. And so, at any rate, so we're going forward now, and we'll just have to see what happens next in all this fiasco. And I guess the other thing to watch out for is what kind of emergency powers he uses this crisis to impose, and then maybe not to remove once the conflict is over with. Of course, defining what the conflict being over with will be another issue as well. But at any rate, we look forward to what's coming next. The assault on Kiev is coming, I guess, and we'll just have to see how that turns out. I really think they're going to be moving into a pretty bad situation for the Russian side and for the people there that remain. Anyway, I try to keep everything get the information as best I can see it and get my thoughts on it. But I don't see at this moment any movement toward actually ending the conflict and moving toward a withdrawal of Russian forces. And I don't know that they could successfully occupy either. By the way, my addresses of my various I'm on Twitter and on also Gab, Gettr, and Parler. So I primarily post these videos on the last three, and my ongoing comments are mostly on Twitter, but I try to put some on the others as well from time to time. And I am also posting these on Rumble as well, although I don't have nearly as much of a following there. So, but I figure as a backup I'll do that. So I'll close this for now, and until next time.